and welcome to your daily game sizzle with me, Jon Jordan. Today we are looking at Glu Mobile. It is a company we look at fairly frequently, certainly in terms of computer game stock companies, as in companies you can buy the shares of. It's one of the most interesting to look at. Today we're looking at Glu Mobile in the context of royalties, so games that use external IP and how that's worked with Glu in the past. Quick overview. So Glu Mobile is doing very well at the moment. We can see from this graph here, this is the last 6 quarters of GAAP revenue. So we can see here, certainly for the last 3 quarters, it's been going up very strongly quarter on quarter. Certainly 2017, that's really accelerated. So what's the main reason for that? Well, we can see from the yellow bar, the yellow segment of the stacked bar, that the games from CrowdStar, a company acquired in November 2016, are doing particularly well. So one of those is Covert Fashion, which is an older game, still doing quite well though, but the big game that's doing very well for it is Design Home. So Design Home is a interior design game, and Glu is spending quite a lot of UA money to promote it, and already it's done over $40 million of gross revenue. So from one point of view, that's very good, obviously very good for Glu, and equally it's an internal IP, so it's not paying any royalties on that game. So, but we can also see from the blue portion of the stacked column that those are games that Glu publishes that do have royalties attached to them. So even though CrowdStar games are the main kind of focus, we can see the games with royalties attached to them are growing as well. So obviously you want to, that's good. You want your company to be growing, and you want the games from all kind of uses of IP to be growing as well. Particularly if you look at the royalty games that have a royalty attached to them, the main reason it's growing at the moment is there's a Gordon Ramsay game, so it's now called Gordon Ramsay Restaurant Dash, and also it has this baseball game, so MLB Tap Sports Baseball 2017, get that right. So that is obviously a licensed game with the Major League Baseball, and also Chris Bryant, a baseball player. So every time it makes money on those games, those companies get some royalties. So that's the basic kind of layout for what we're going to look at today. So to go a little bit back in history with Glu Mobile, this, as we can see, is going back 2.5 years. So the blue column here, this is the percentage of revenue that are based on external IP. So the percentage of Glu's revenue that was based on games that involved a royalty payment. So as we can see, until 2017, Glu was, 55-60% of its revenue came from games with using external IP, so required a royalty. We can see, as we've kind of discussed, with the CrowdStar games doing very well now in 2017, that's dropped off, so less than 50% for the first time. So that's important because obviously when you're paying a royalty, you are giving some money away. Obviously the point of using a external IP is you hope that it will appeal immediately to an audience, so you hope that game will do better sales than if you didn't have an original IP. But there is obviously a margin that you pay for that advantage. So if we look at the red columns here, so this is the overall royalties as a percentage of Glu's GAAP revenue on a quarter. So we can see here, it's not massive in a sense. It's around 10%, currently 8.5%, so under 10%. But basically, when Glu makes money at the moment, 8.5% of its GAAP revenue is being given away to companies in terms of royalty basis. Now we can see, you might be going, what's that crazy big red bar in Q3 financial year 2016? Well, that was Glu had an impairment, so an almost $30 million impairment based around its royalties. That basically meant, what that meant was it did a whole bunch of licenses that it had kind of commitments to, so minimum guaranteed royalties. In that case, that's not normally a bad thing to do. So you have a minimum guarantee that you say to a licensor, we'll definitely pay you this, and then as the game kind of makes money, you kind of pay that kind of off. In this case, Glu had a whole bunch of games that didn't make enough money to pay that off, so it had to basically write off that $30 million that it had promised to licensing companies, or companies it had licensed IP from. And that's kind of when that's the warning sign. That's when kind of external IP development using different licenses goes wrong because you're not in control of it and you have these minimum guarantees. So Glu had to write that off, which is why you have this massive big peak. Hopefully now, and because it's written off all this kind of bad performance in the past, Glu won't suffer from this again. But just to point out that it has had these problems in the past. So let's have a look at some of the games that Glu has released that have been based on external licenses. So clearly the most famous one, we can see the red line there, Kim Kardashian Hollywood. That was the reason Glu got heavily into particularly celebrity-based IP. So Kim Kardashian was released in June 2014 and was an immediate hit. And we can see there, so this chart is the US iPhone top grossing chart. So the higher you are up the chart, the more money you're making. So you can see certainly Kim Kardashian Hollywood for 2014, or the half that we've got there, was performing very well. In 2015, it still was performing pretty well in the top 50. That's a pretty good performance. And then we see in 2016, Glu started releasing a lot of other celebrity-based games, which is kind of where the problem started. So the pink line there is Kendall and Kylie, so the Kardashian half-sisters. And you can see there it launched very well, so it went very high, and then quite quickly, certainly by the end of halfway through the year, it pretty much dropped out of the top 200. And when you're at the top 100, you're really not making that much money. Certainly by the top 200, you're not making any money. So what else was there launched? So we can see the next one is the blue line, and that's the Gordon Ramsay game. Originally it was called Gordon Ramsay Dash, and now it's Gordon Ramsay Restaurant Dash. And actually that's done pretty well, relatively speaking. So it launched in the top 100, and then although it's dropped down, it's done pretty well. So it's done about $30 million of lifetime revenue. Obviously some of that has gone to Gordon Ramsay, but as these deals go, that's not bad. Then we have next one along is Britney Spears. So the high-vis green, we can see did launch in the top 50, did peak there, but then pretty much came straight down again. Britney Spears was a, I think we can call it a disaster. Glu hasn't said how much money it generated, but for the one quarter it did talk about it. It said it generated $1.1 million, which clearly wasn't very much. And then even worse was the next one along, the yellow one, Nicki Minaj, the Empire. And that launched at the end of 2016, and as you can see, it kind of did again, it went in the top 100, but pretty much straight down again. So these games, also there was another one, Katy Perry in 2015, Katy Perry Pop. All those three games were I think we have to say disasters, and that was one of the reasons that Glu had to impair all that money. But to prove that licensed games are not always a disaster, we can see that the final game there in the kind of lighter blue, and that's the baseball game, Tap Sport Baseball. So we can see it launched launched into the top 50 top grossing iPhone games in the States, and it's continued to stay there. Obviously at the moment it is baseball season, so that will drop off as baseball season drops off during September. But what's interesting about that baseball game is Glu had the previous year released a baseball game, a non-licensed one. So this game, the licensed one, 2017 edition, has done a lot better. So it may have done even like 40% better in terms of gross revenue. But what you have to remember is that Glu is giving away some royalties. So obviously anything that goes through an app store, Apple or Google, depending on the app store, take 30% of that gross revenue up front. That's just the way app stores work. And then Glu, maybe giving away, we don't know, but maybe about 20% is average at the moment. So maybe giving but 20% of the net to the Major League Baseball and Chris Bryant in this particular game. So although the game has been successful, it's maybe a bit less profitable than people might imagine. And that's always the kind of the rub with royalties, is royalties can get you a lot of kind of revenue. But unless you know the details of the royalty rate, it's hard to know how much profit's being made. And that was particularly the case with Kim Kardashian. It's still not, no one really knows exactly what well, obviously Glu do, but no one outside of Glu knows exactly what royalty rate they're paying her, because it was the first deal, so it may have been a bit looser in terms of their royalties. But certainly she tweeted that she had banked a check for $80 million. That seems unlikely, given the game has not yet made $200 million of revenue. It probably will do by the end of this year. But that would be an incredibly high royalty rate, although not impossible. But if Kim Kardashian had got $80 million of the $200 million Glu had made, obviously Apple and Google would get $60 million. So that would only leave Glu with do the maths. That would leave Glu with $60 million of that $200 million, which would not be good business. And again, this is always the kind of problem, the fine detail with these games involving royalties is what's the actual deal and how much money are you giving away to sign those deals. So we don't know the detail of every deal that Glu does, but it does break out some figures now to let people have a bit better of an idea what's going on with royalties. So this here is a cash flow graph. So for the last year and a half, and the red line, the red column, is the cash generated by operations or cash that's gone in to pay for operations. So the general kind of running of the company. And we can see in 2016, Glu Mobile actually had 3 quarters of positive cash flow, which is what you want to see. Glu is not profitable from a GAAP point of view, or even from a non-GAAP point of view. But cash flow positive is the first sign you would get that the company was going to get profitable. As we can see in 2017, those 2 quarters where it's doing very well, it's used up quite a lot of cash in operations. Partly that's because it's spending this kind of user acquisition money to help the long-term kind of profitability of the design home game. So the other bar here is we have the yellow bar, and this is cash paid for royalties. So this is what Glu is paying out for royalties. So some of these will be when it signs a deal, it will pay some royalties up front and then recoup that. And then some of it will be obviously when a game has got through its kind of has recouped to a certain level, then it will have to start to pay out the share of royalties to the companies who it's taken the license off. And we can see, these are quite sizable amounts. So we have every 2 quarters we have at least $10 million of cash being paid out to companies, and then the blue line is the combination of all of them. So we can see, there's a bit of a zigzag because you have this kind of this 6-month kind of payment cycle for the big payouts from Glu. It is a little bit of a concern, I guess, that even though Glu is doing very well, and Glu will probably hit break even in Q1 of 2018, or maybe potentially may even break even to some degree in Q4 of 2017. But it still has this kind of cash flow issue, which is not really what you want to see. And again, just goes back to royalties. They do come at a price, particularly if you have unperforming games. I think at the moment Glu doesn't have a lot of unperforming royalty games, but it still can have this kind of this drag on your profitability. So our final graph tying everything together, what's going on here. So if you look at the red column, this is kind of what we've seen already. This is GAAP quarterly revenue. So we've gone back a bit further in this one. We've gone back a year and 2.5 years. So we can see it's kind of bobbled around a little bit, and then it kind of is now kind of coming up. And actually, Q2 2017 was actually only $1 million off the peak before, and that was we can see in 2015 that was kind of the peak. So that's going well. We can see at the bottom again we have profitability. So I've banged on about profitability, and the yellow column there is a GAAP profit and loss. And we can see Glu has been profitable in 2015, marginally so, not much money. But we can see basically the kind of losses are increasing. Again, we have this very big loss in Q3 2016. This is this impairment loss. So to try and have a look at the impact of royalties, I've done this green line. So this is GAAP profit and loss if you take out the royalties that Glu's paying at, during those times. So this is something I've kind of just in a sense made up. It's not a proper accounting figure, but to try and get an idea, if all the games Glu had been internal IP and it wasn't paying out royalties, how better would its performance be? And we can see in financial year 2015, it would have been profitable in every quarter. So at that point, royalties were having this kind of impact on profitability in terms of being profitable or loss making. In 2016 and 17, if it hadn't been paying out royalties, it would not have made such big losses, but it still would be nowhere near profitable. So while I've been banging on about royalties, there are still, to me, there are other issues for Glu to deal with in terms of its profitability. It's not just about royalties. Royalties have dragged it, made it less or more loss-making than it otherwise would be. But it's not licensing and royalties on its own that have made Glu loss making. There is other kind of structural issues that have to be dealt with. So is there good news for the future? Well, there is. So we've looked at the now the final one, the blue line on top. That is booking. So that's a non-GAAP figure. It's a not going into too much detail about it, but basically bookings are the money that Glu took in a quarter. To reconcile that to GAAP revenue, it has to defer some of that revenue over it does it over a 9-month period. So when it has bookings, some of that is spread over a longer period. But we can see, it's a really big uptick in bookings. This is coming particularly from this design home game. And if it keeps going at that level, or even if it kind of starts to plateau off at that level, we'll start to see Glu's losses diminishing, and as we say, by the end of 2017 or start 2018, it may be hitting break even at least. So why have I banged on about royalties? Well, the other reason is that obviously we have this Glu has for a long time announced it has a deal with Taylor Swift. That game will be coming out in November, we imagine, alongside her new album. On the 10th of November is the album, so imagine the game will be alongside that. What could the impact for that be for Glu? Well, Glu has a conservatively modelled no revenue from that game in its financial year, because obviously if the game came out in November, it would only be maybe 6 weeks of revenue that it could possibly generate, and it doesn't know how that celebrity game is going to do. I think what we can say is with the hype around Taylor Swift's new album, the game will get lots of downloads. Downloads do not mean revenue. They can mean revenue, but it's difficult to judge. Taylor Swift has perhaps a slightly younger audience, certainly than Kim Kardashian, and so if you have a younger audience, are they going to pay in the same level? Are they going to even have access to credit cards? So it's very much an unknown how profitable that game's going to be. And as I pointed out, with games bearing royalties, you're always less profitable than you think you are. I mean, the good news is Glu has presumably already paid money to Taylor Swift, so it's not going to be paying out a lot more in terms of upfront royalties. But there still is the issue, if the game doesn't kind of make back its minimum, then they're going to have to impair that money again. So I think, in terms of this, certainly the market sentiment around Glu Mobile, very positive at the moment. For me, an issue still that it is loss making, and it's not clear, certainly from terms of cash flow in this year to date, it's not gone kind of positive. So there are still, I think, some structural issues within Glu that I would want to see kind of changing before I got very enthusiastic about investing. But certainly market sentiment is high, and I think combined with the Taylor Swift kind of hype around her album, market sentiment is only going to continue to get more excitable as the end of the year comes about and that game launch comes about. So anyway, thanks for watching the video. We like to do these deep dives into company finance, particularly companies like Glu and Zynga, EA. And the usual suspects, Activision, Take-Two. So don't forget to subscribe if you like that kind of thing. But thanks for watching, and hope to see you again soon.
Hi, and thanks for watching right to the end of the video. We always like to see your comments, so please put them in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe. And check out some more of our other videos about the mobile games industry. There's 2 really good examples on your screen right now.